Hi, I'm Megan Elliott, co-founder and managing director of GingerCloud Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us for Series 2 of our podcasts, Creating Inclusion Ambassadors. The aim of this podcast series is to provide a platform where people can share their stories of inclusion within their communities. And we'll begin to learn the skills needed for all of us to ask why not to inclusion and accessibility. Thanks so much for joining us today to share with us your stories of your community, the barriers to inclusion and participation that you see, and how you're championing change. So, Rhett, first off, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, I'm currently doing photojournalism at uni. I went to school in Toowoomba and have now moved back down to Brizzy to go to uni. I've been a part of the modified rugby for 6 years now and currently work as a support worker, kind of stemming from my coaching role.
Well, tell us a bit about your family and some of your values. Obviously, we know your mum really well, and what sort of influence you think that might have had on the person you are today.
Well, actually, it was because of mum that I got into the MRP. As a bit of an accident. She sent me an email. I thought it was a extracurricular kind of training program, and then I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And it turned out to be MRP is a bit different than what I expected. So yeah, it's just me and mum. My grandparents have now passed. They were a big part of my childhood. I suppose of any kind of family value that she's really ingrained in me, that's kind of it's got me to where I am today. It's to make sure your word's impeccable. If you say something. You say you're going to do something, you do it.
What do you think about how school shaped you as well? Obviously, tell us a little bit about Toowoomba Grammar School and your experience there, and it's a pretty special place.
I love Toowoomba Grammar. I'd gone to 3 schools before grammar, and grammar really kind of put an emphasis on service. I'd started in the modified rugby program a year before I went to grammar. And then in my second year at grammar, the modified rugby went up to Toowoomba, so I was able to continue it up there. I think I'd be a very different person if I didn't go to Toowoomba Grammar. Yeah, I was very grateful to, have such a great experience.
What other things do you think have influenced your thinking? Because obviously we'll talk a little bit later on about all the other things that you do. Because our experience of you is you're very modest in terms of what you do and the way you shaped young people's lives, and that's part of what I'd love to chat with you a little bit more about. But you've got family, you've had school. What other experiences did you think really helped shape you? Is there anything else that you think is really important?
I was quite keen on following rugby after school professionally. I don't think I would have ever made it, but it was a dream. And so then there was a trip to Nepal, like just a kind of a holiday trip the school was organising.
Yeah.
And so mum said she didn't want me moping around the house all holidays, so she sent me on that. And I saw a pretty different way of living. I saw Nepal's a third world country. You see some things you would never see in Australia. And then later that year, I spent 2 months in India on a school exchange, and the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So I suppose getting away from that adolescent schoolboy mindset, rugby's the world or party's the world or all this stuff, and kind of realising how lucky we are. A sense of empathy, I suppose, is ingrained with that perspective. And understanding that, we have a lot to give.
And I think that's something that, in terms of what you're doing now with uni, can you talk a little bit about the photojournalism and why that's so important to you? I think it's such an incredible... I've seen some of your images. They're amazing.
Thank you.
And we're really shaped by that experience. So, yeah, do you want to share a little bit more about that with us?
I think photojournalism is important because, pictures tell 1,000 words, and if you can really kind of craft a story that really... I prefer to tell stories that focus on individuals or groups and tell their story away from, stereotypes or kind of labels, tell their story as humans, kind of invoke a feeling of empathy with the readers, and then tie that back to a wider social or global issue.
And connection is that key element about what community is all about, isn't it?
Too right.
And so I guess just stepping back a little bit more, you mentioned that we've known each other. You've been part of our community for 6 years. Do you want to just go back a little bit more detail from the beginning and share a little bit more about that story?
The first year I was with Jake.
So this is during the pilot
in
2014?
Yeah, 2014 pilot. I was a mentor and my player was Jake.
Yep.
And Jake's very intelligent. So you'd have other players who, you know, it's a modified game of rugby, and Jake had learnt the game, the rules, you know, off by heart. And he was very particular with the rules. He knew the rules. It's like, these are the rules. This is how we're going to play. This is how I'm going to play.
Yeah.
But you had other players who, you know, would need leniency. You know, they couldn't get the rules. They didn't have the learning capabilities to understand the game.
Yeah.
And for the first half of the season, when that would happen, Jake would run off the field screaming and crying. And by the end of the season, it was pretty awesome to see not only him staying on the field the whole game, but you know, staying on Suncorp, you know, in front of thousands of people for the whole game. Yeah, it was pretty profound, and it wasn't something I was ready for, but I think it's something that I'm very grateful for, having that experience.
Because how old were you then?
14.
Yeah, see, was that one of those, if you think back now, was that a bit of a light bulb moment for you?
Yeah, absolutely. At least the start of one. I think my 6 years in the MRP have been a light bulb moment all in one.
You can share the story, or if you don't want to tell it, I will, but how the MRP got to Toowoomba. Oh. Do you want me to tell a story, or do you want to?
Oh, no, I can tell it. Well, so I moved up to Toowoomba in 2015. That year, with the help of my mum, I commuted down each Friday for the weekend to coach a team at Ashgrove.
So for people who don't know Brisbane and Toowoomba, about how far is that?
About an hour 45.
Yep. So every Friday afternoon?
Yep.
Yep.
And then the next year, I had a chat to my housemaster, and he was pretty keen to bring it up to Toowoomba, so we had a chat with you guys, and yeah, we ended up starting a team at USQ in 2016.
So can I add a little bit more to that story?
Yeah, sure.
So I had a phone call from your mum one day, which was just one of the things I remember so clearly. She called me and she said, "How do you feel about the MRP going to Toowoomba?" And I went, "Oh, look, I think that'll be great at some point." And she said, "How about like next year?" I went, "Yeah, sounds great." And she said, "Because Rhett has organised for all of this to happen." And you were 15 at that stage, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, 15, 16.
And I remember thinking to myself, I just couldn't tie my shoelaces at 15, let alone organise something like that. And I remember walking into the meeting with Mr. Noble, and I think Paul Hanna was there at the time, and you had a clipboard with notes, and I just remember sitting there thinking, such a special young person. I know you hate it when I talk, but it's a really profound thing to have that happen, and it's one of the memories that I honestly cherish most about the MRP, because one of the things when we created or foresaw this is we always thought and knew it would benefit our kids. It's the player mentors and the young people and the coaches that we didn't anticipate the impact that it would have. It's such a profound thing to see that influence on someone else's life, and with the alumni, which is why we're doing all of this, is the thought in our mind was, how do we help shape more young people like you? That vision of the person who drives inclusion, who's a leader in disability inclusion, and that's really how we see you. Yeah, it's one of those, I'm not sure if I've ever told you, but it was such a strong memory that I have about the impact of what that was like. So thank you for
my pleasure.
And now, of course, did we say at the beginning, so explain what your role is now within the modified rugby program. So did you explain you were a coach and a little bit more about that?
I'm a coach at West Colts.
Uh-huh.
So Colts is it's 13 to 18,
Yeah.
around about.
Yeah.
We have a few blokes that are a bit older than 18, but and I'm an alumni ambassador. So the alumni program's about once players move out of the MRP, they're still a part of the community, and they're still included.
Well, talking about ambassadorships, I think that brings us to another question about your community and the influence that you're having, not just within the Australian community, but the global community now as well. So do you want to share a little bit about what your role is at UNICEF and what that means to you?
Yes, I'm a UNICEF Australia ambassador, young ambassador. So I got a year and a half term, and we kind of our main role is we go around our respective states and consult with young people and kind of figure out and listen to what their problems are. Then we funnel it through to politicians with a report that we take down to Canberra in August, I think.
Yep. And how many people in Australia have that role, and what was it like kind of going through that process?
So there's 10 of us. There's 2 from Victoria and New South Wales, respectively.
Yeah.
And then there's 1 from every other state or territory. So we had to apply by sending a resume, writing an essay, and then if we got through that stage, we had an interview. I'd sent through the application a few months earlier, and I got a call on a Thursday morning. It was 11 o'clock, and I was still in bed. And I got a call. It's like, "Hi, I'm Vanessa from UNICEF." And in my head, I was like, "I don't have any money. I'm 19. I barely have enough money to pay my rent." And then I got it, and then I got the interview, and actually swore at Vanessa when she told me I got it. I couldn't believe it. But
wow.
Yeah, no, it's pretty awesome.
And so what have you already done in terms of that role, or is it only just started? Like, what's the lay of the land look like for the year in terms of that role?
For the past 6 months, 7 months, we've had a week of training in Sydney at the UNICEF office.
Mm-hmm.
And then so we've just been kind of conceptualising how we're going to run our consultations, what questions we're going to ask. I've met with my local member, Trevor Evans. Our consultations have started. My first consultations will be in the middle of February in Toowoomba. Yep. And then a few more through March, and then towards April. There's some side projects as well. So we do a lot of work with the Child's Right Commissioner, Megan Mitchell. Yep. So far, it's been mostly planning, but as term 1 kicks in, that's when we get into the bulk of our work.
Okay, great. So, Rhett, a little bit more about your community. What does community mean to you, and who do you think is in, or who do you see as in your community?
I think community is people that know you, understand you, and include you. It's a support network and a social group, kind of all in the same. I'd say a big part of my community is my rugby team here at Brothers. My mates from school and university, my mates from the MRP. My family, obviously, mum and stuff. How do you see yourself within that close community? What do you see your role as being? I don't know. I suppose just a part of it. Bit of a joker. I don't take much seriously. It's interesting though, isn't it? Because community is really important to you. Mm. It may not have been conscious all that time, but you are making such a significant impact in terms of your community. So it's obviously a very important value to you. Mm. Have you had much thought about, why that is? Because some people may not do things to move and create more community, which is what you're doing. What you're doing. You may not have labelled it that way or thought about it in that way, but that's what you're doing. Well, I suppose coming back to like family values and being impeccable with my word, I suppose I kind of relate that to my morals as well. So I suppose it's just I see a need for inclusion. I see kind of a need for community, and then I don't know. I suppose it's the only thing to do next is to actually kind of cultivate that community. And it's interesting, and that's, I guess, which really leads us to the next question, is that's really important, but what are some of the barriers that you have seen or experienced for inclusion and participation, whether it be not just the MRP, but obviously you've been in Nepal, you've been in India, you're working with UNICEF, so
you're having a much broader base than potentially a lot of other young people your age. So what are the things that you see?
I suppose in terms of inclusion for people with disability, I think the biggest thing is a level of understanding, a level of empathy. For so long, you have people with disability and their families so isolated from their community, almost like a bubble to the side.
Such a powerful image. Yeah.
So I suppose kind of that understanding that people taking the time to think a bit further than the label of disability.
Yeah.
Kind of seeing them more as people, taking the time to get to know them, to understand them. I suppose in a broader scope, in India, I spent a month at a school, and that school had a special school. It's the exact same thing there. So before this school came in, there was 9 villages in the area, and the kids with disability, they wouldn't have names. They'd be called deaf or dumb or stupid or blind.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And then this school came in about 12 years ago, and it went into the villages, and they're like, that's not the case. They're human beings. It's just they're a little different to you. And now you're seeing, parents every day walking their kids to school, parents coming to school plays, the special school puts on dances and performances and stuff, and the parents are all there. And you've seen a huge shift in perspective and kind of, how these villages and communities see their young people with disability. And it's all through this school and it coming in and kind of just, sitting them down and being like, this is how it is.
And you wouldn't, or I wouldn't have thought that, because I guess we've moved on from that point, but not even giving a child a name who has a disability, how profound is that in terms of not being part of the community, that's something that we all take for granted? Yeah,
too right, absolutely. It definitely was profound. It took a couple of days for it to sink in. And while it was sinking in, I was in class with these kids running kind of programs with the mainstream school and the special school, and they're just kids.
Yeah.
Really. And I'm kind of thinking that these guys didn't have names. They weren't sent to school. They were just left to kind of hang around the village all day.
I can't imagine what that experience would have been like, but it really helps me understand now. You're so blessed in terms of that broad range of experience that you've had through school and family, and we really see you as truly as an inclusion leader. There's so much that with your experience that we can share with other people. So thank you, and thank you for doing this today too.
That's right.
The last question is really about, why do you think inclusion matters, and what are some of the actions that you've taken some profound actions, but what are other actions that people can take to increase the inclusion within their own communities?
I think inclusion is important, because I think if you look at it kind of 5 years ago, before the NDIS really kicked in, I see their Brisbane community as able-bodied men and women, able to kind of go out by themselves, look after themselves.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's not our community at all.
Yeah.
And I suppose inclusion is kind of popping that bubble that I was talking about before, and bringing a large part of our community into the fold of an actual community. I was at a talk once, and he was talking about compassion, and he'd done a lot of research with homeless people. Mm-hmm. And what he was talking about was literally just look at them and smile. When you see someone on the street, it's pretty normal not to look at them.
Yeah, so true.
And you can kind of imagine, you're there and you got hundreds of people walking past you every day and not one of them looks at you.
Yeah.
And you really kind of start to doubt your humanity. So I suppose in a sense it's just kind of, looking at them, smiling at them, and kind of just, including them as human beings. For me, it's kind of when my friends ask me about the modified rugby, it's just talking about it.
Yeah.
It's just talking about, what I've learned about how, disability is just a small part of what makes up these players and people as human beings. I suppose when you kind of having those small conversations, and those conversations are sinking in, it's kind of like hopefully that's going to be a ripple effect out to other people.
One of the things that I often say to people is that inclusion isn't a privilege, it's a human right.
You're right.
And I love that the things that we get to talk about, is not just what we're doing with rugby, but helping people think differently about what it means, and that it's like the expectation that everyone has the right to be included, everyone has the right to participate, and it's not someone going, oh yeah, it's great to have you involved. It's like, actually, we're a fabric of the society that adds such value to other people's lives. And that's one of the things that over the next few years that we'd really love to be able to share, is that we don't come with a cost. We come with incredible value in terms of how we help young people think differently, the way we've connected families. I was talking to someone the other day, and some of the incredible problems that our families find ways to solve, so many corporate environments could learn so much just from incredibly agile problem solving, and that we all have value irrespective of what our own developmental pathway is, because we all have something to contribute.
Absolutely, yeah.
I just want to say thank you. We are so grateful. So I get all teary, that you've been involved for such a long time, and seeing you grow as a young person from that start to now be at uni, and to have this incredible role within UNICEF, and that you're still here with us now, means a lot, not just to us, but to me and to Ant and to Max and Lara, and so thank you.
No, thank you. No, I always say, I think I've gotten more out of the MRP than I could ever give. So it's a pretty amazing thing you guys are doing.
Thank you, Rhett.